Let's start off our financial committee meeting on Tuesday, December 5th. Begin with a roll call, starting with Mr. Epps.
Zachary Epps, present.
Roman here.
William Mulhern, present.
Charles Riddell Williams, present.
Mia Blitzstein, present.
Ross Whiting, present.
Robin Wilson, present.
Dan Schultz, present. The next item on the agenda would be approval of previous meetings minutes. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Ms. Mulhern?
Second.
Mr. Burdell Williams, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. All right, Mr. Swigart.
Thank you, Dan. All right, so tonight we'll cover the usual, the interim financial statements, balance sheet, change in fund balance. We'll take a look at fund accounting and all of the funds held by the district to get a better global picture of all of the money and the activities that we manage, and talk about fund balance allocation across those funds. We'll take a look at the first step of the budgeting process. That's the building level budget based on student enrollment. And then last, we'll talk about the one item for board approval on the agenda next week. That's the Act 1 resolution. All right, so first, let's take a look at the balance sheet of November of this year to 2023 versus November of 2022. Again, I sound like a broken record. Cash, it continues to be in a strong position from year to year. You'll notice some large changes on the balance sheet. We're doing things a little bit differently this year. As we receive federal revenue, we're charging it off against receivables. We're not waiting to make those adjustments until the end of the year. So it'll look like our federal revenue is down, but in reality, we're just charging those collections against receivables. So we're decreasing this balance. Looking down at the bottom, we have our fund balance and we have our current year-to-date listing of revenue and expenditures. You can see year to year, our revenue is relatively flat and our expenditures are relatively flat comparatively. Taking a deeper dive into our revenues and expenditures, year to date through November 2023, we're showing $105 million of collections and revenues. That is $96 million of local source revenue. That is $1.6 million more than at this time last year, primarily driven again by real estate taxes and interest income, by the favorable prime interest rate. We had a discussion we just recently spoke as to why our federal revenues have decreased, which isn't really a decrease, but a recording methodology. And we look at our total expenditures, $43 million, net change in fund balance, $62 million, even approximately versus about the same last year. Couple areas I wanted to highlight when thinking about where the district is headed and where some rough patches and areas of concern year over year might be. You can see our transportation costs are starting to tick up. We already have $200,000 more in transportation costs year over year. If you recall, when we did our RFP for transportation, the 23-24 school year was the one year we had a 10% increase in our transportation daily rate. So the majority of this cost, $1.7 million, you should see a $170,000 increase roughly. We're at $200,000. So October just so happened to have a couple more days than the last October, a couple more school transport days. But as we progress on throughout the school year, you should continue to see this increase expand on a $7.5 million year-to-date transportation line, and you're going to see a $750,000 increase year over year. So far, we haven't seen any large increases in salaries. We do have a collective bargaining agreement that is currently in negotiations. So in the event that's settled, we could see some differences in some of our wages for these categories, particularly in operations, regular education, and special education. Any questions on the balance sheet and the revenues and expenses?
Any questions from the board?
Just
Burdell Williams.
sorry. Looking at the year-over-year variance and special programs, aka special education costs, just that increase attributed to anything specific, or is that just kind of, in line with some of the unpredictability of the cost there.
So I would attribute this just to timing of the payment of some of our tuitions. In special ed, we make big lump sum payments for some of the tuitions that are $30,000, $60,000 for 2 special ed students to other institutions. So if that bill comes in November and we pay November 30th instead of December 1st, it could look like a large variance. I'm not tracking any large expenditure changes from year to year, meaning our charter school enrollment doesn't appear to be any higher than the prior year, so our special ed charter school cost should be about the same. Right now, I'm not tracking any large increases in enrollment or placements from special ed. The year is still young, that could change. So I wouldn't attribute this to anything yet other than just timing.
Any other questions, Mr. Burdell?
Yeah, just one more follow-up, and this was like more so in the educational affairs space, but just related. I know we brought our autism program back in-house, and we're staffing appropriately. Are we whole there? Are we fully staffed there? I mean, I know staffing is an ongoing challenge, but just generally speaking.
So we're much better staffed this year in terms of paraprofessionals than we were last year. Last year, we were constantly searching for more. We're in a much better position than we were last year at this time. So at the end of the year, the expectation for special ed would be there's built-in salary increases in our collective bargaining agreements for our teachers, and there's a lot of teacher wage expense in special ed and regular ed. So you should see an increase because of the collective bargaining agreement. And our tuition rates go up every year for inflation, so you should see some tuition increases as well for charter schools and for outside placements.
And you probably will see a slight increase also because of some of the outside resources that we're using to work along with our schools in terms of peer review, auditing, professional development, to make sure the staff is getting the training and we are implementing the programs with the fidelity in which we should. So the slight variance.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think where I was going is I know that when we talked about this year's budget last year, that was a large line item kind of knowing that this was like year 2 of us keeping the program in-house, that, paraprofessional staffing was a challenge, but then also the additional resources that would be needed to build up the new program, and just kind of anticipating something from a cost perspective that maybe isn't so clear here, or maybe is, and just wanted to kind of break the number down a little bit.
And I think it's February. We will, during Ed Affairs, there will be a special ed presentation that will go into more detail around the current state.
Good. Excellent. That's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Epps. Did you have a question?
Thanks, Anthony. Related to transportation costs, in a previous conversation, we were talking about contractual increases, but some realized savings because of actual routes.
Yes.
So the increases you talk about, and I clearly see it here in the balance sheet, was that more of a one-time thing? Are we looking at something that reflects timing as well, and there might be some adjustments at the end of the year, or is it?
So you bring up a good point. So we're working off of a reduced cost to begin with. We're looking at a 10% increase on that reduced cost. And to put it in context, our current daily transportation rate is right in the ballpark, if not less than a lot of surrounding districts for our daily rate. So there's nothing inappropriate about our transportation rate. I just wanted to point out that because contractually this is a 10% increase year, we're going to see a larger year-over-year expense. And I think that's just the contractor catching up for some of the rise in wages and CDL drivers that they weren't able to catch up for in prior years because they were locked in under a contract. So it was essentially this raise has to happen to pay these drivers, or nobody's going to be able to drive our students.
Yeah, certainly full trust. Wasn't questioning appropriateness of it. It was really at the end of the year, might there be a similar scenario where there might be some, not overall savings, but the price may fluctuate because of actual runs or something that was done.
I think we worked that down to a pretty slim number in terms of routes. So short of reducing the number of stops.
Yeah.
So I don't think we're at that
Okay.
point. So I think that was
One time.
yeah.
It's good to know.
Thank you, Mr. Epps. Any other board questions? Seeing none, any questions from the public? Seeing none, I think we can go to the next agenda.
So more interfinancial.
I mean, we can go on to the next portion of this agenda.
Just a summary of prior slide. And looking at the local revenues, we discussed this last month. Our delinquent real estate tax overall balance that's due to the district is less than it has been in years, which is really a sign of a strong tax base that's able to pay their tax bills. And this decrease in delinquent taxes isn't really anything to be concerned about. It's just a function of that. On the real estate tax side, we do have this $700,000 increase from the prior year. Again, it's driven by the tax rate increase. And interest earnings, you can see this is really driving a lot of our budget, $1.5 million this year. It's already double last year. And in the business office, we're really watching. You probably think when you see the news, who really cares about the prime rate and what's going on with these loans? We care because this directly relates to what we're going to do. Meaning, if we start to get a sense that the prime rate is dropping, which has already happened, we're going to start locking in some longer term. That's not good.
We started.
It's like we're doing.
We're going to see how much money can we commit to 12 months, 24 months even, lock in some of that higher rates when it does drop. Yes, some of those interest earnings still saved. All right, now I'm done with the interfinancial statements.
If we're moving, can I ask?
Absolutely, yes.
Mr. Sparker, the real estate transfer taxes, I had thought that we did we expect that to decrease more than it did?
So
I seem to remember a conversation
I would have
based
expected
on,
the
yeah.
anticipation would be it would decrease more than it has. So
Yeah.
it's a good thing.
Yeah, oh. Absolutely, all right, thank you.
Any other questions on any questions from the public? Yes.
And
it's technically
That's what it is.
That's what it is. If you could reintroduce yourself.
Karen Max Winco, I'm sorry, my question is school bus, transportation costs. So I don't know how feasible this is, but I know that Philly did a program where they paid parents to drive their kids to school to cut down on their transportation issues. I'm not sure where those funds came from or how beneficial is to actually save them money by doing that, but I do know that was something that they started in the pandemic, but they continued on in the school districts that families had until October 1st to enroll to opt to drive their child to school as opposed to using the school bus system, which helped them cut down on their shortages and cost of paying for transportation. So I don't know if that's something that we looked at as a district to see if that could help to cut transportation costs. If you have families that are able to actually just take their kids to school and pick them up. If it would be an incentive program or if that would fall under some type of federal funds you could use, or it's not hurting the district to pay them. I'm not sure how the Philly district did that, but I do know that's a program that they do have that they kept on for this current school year, for parents to opt into. So that's the question.
We have not looked at that
Okay.
at this point in time. We're always open. I'm always an out of the box type of individual. Our data has not driven us to have to consider other options, but if there's savings potentially, it's a conversation that we could entertain in terms of our on-time drop-off and pickup. We're in pretty good shape. So, but I always like out of the box ideas.
Yeah, I know something that they did. I know it was a pandemic thing, but they just continued on with it. Some people just prefer to drop their kids off anyway, so it's just worked out for them. And I don't know how much they're saving by doing that, but it couldn't hurt to look at it to see.
And then we have to look at our contract. There's a lot that goes in,
Right.
but to answer your question, no, we had not, which was your initial question.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I think you hit the nail on the head. That was in response to the driver shortage and how to get kids to school. I think our concern here is more car volume in elementary schools. Do we have the space? I think there's potentially some minor savings in it, but is the savings worth the added danger of being able to drop all the kids off of the school bus right on the sidewalk? I don't know the answer to that.
Thank you.
All right, next topic. Looking at all of the various funds held by the school district. So we always focus on the general fund because this is where the vast majority of the volume of the district occurs, the day-to-day operations. But we also hold numerous funds under numerous categories. We have two funds that are involved in capital activities in the school district. One is the capital projects fund, which is specifically reserved for building projects within the school district. The other is the capital reserve fund, which is specifically reserved for maintenance and future building projects within the district. These two together hold approximately $16 million available for future school projects and capital needs in the district, which far exceed the $16 million we have reserved. And that leads to the discussion on fund balance transfers and allocations. So these funds are listed as of June 30th, 2023. They're unaudited, so they're not the final audit results. But we will have an approximately $8.5 million surplus for the year ended June 30th. And the question is, what do we do to this surplus? My recommendation would be to allocate the transfer part of the surplus into the capital reserve and capital projects funds to meet the needs in the planned future buildings of the district, so that the district could forego issuing debt and not have to add more debt service to its annual budget, therefore bypassing interest cost on said debt as well. And we will have some monies to replenish. We did do the fire alarm project by the end of the school year. In a cash flow basis, we had only paid for $934,000 of it and still had the balance that was paid in July and August after the project was completed. So my recommendation would be to move some money to replenish the funds that were drained for that project and move some money for future projects. We're already in the midst of a stadium project that is actively spending money on architectural fees and civil engineering fees as the project has been submitted through township. So we're going to need some of that money to pay for that project in the immediate future. I'll make that formal recommendation as a board action whenever the audit is completed. The next fund we never talk about is the food service fund. The food service fund also is currently in a healthy position. The food service fund, by state definition, is called a proprietary fund and is supposed to be run for profit. We try and run it as a not-for-profit. We're not trying to make money. We're just trying to fulfill the service and the needs of the students, with a focus on keeping our lunch and prices down. I almost said breakfast is free. Keeping our lunch prices down as much as possible. We have a self-insurance fund, which is just a pass-through fund for money is going to our health insurance. So this is all negligible. It doesn't really hold any sort of substantial equity. And we have a scholarship fund. This is money that we purely administer. So we get money donated for scholarships, mostly through the high school, for obvious reasons. And we just hold the money and process the checks. We don't really make any decisions. That's the same with the student activity funds. All of the clubs we run through the high school, all the money they collect, the class of 2024, 25, 26 yearbook, that all sits in the student activity fund. Again, that we're just administrators of that money. We don't hold that money or keep that money. So I thought it valuable just to add some context to what we look at each year and see the district as a whole picture. Any questions on the fund statements?
Ms. Lohman?
Yeah, this is just a question, is I don't understand the accounting, I'm not an accountant, but what's the difference between the capital reserve fund and the capital projects fund?
So when you're actively constructing a project and you issue bond money, you stick it in a capital reserve fund because you track, you segregate that money because you're tracking how that bond money is spent for that project, because there's reporting required for how the bond money is used. The capital reserve is if you have a surplus in one year, you can move money to the capital reserve. So that money is set aside for future capital projects and for future repairs the district might need. It's not necessarily tied to a bond issue or a specific project.
Thank you.
Ms. Loman? Or, Ms. Muller?
The scholarship fund, so I understand that that's, when the scholarships are given through the other organizations, but the money comes from us. I mean, they give you the money and yeah. So I guess my question is, if that's the case, I guess why is there a balance if the scholarships have been awarded, but they haven't gotten, I guess I just don't understand that process.
I think it's more of a cash flow issue. We pay out all the scholarships when we get them.
Okay.
I think there is some residual from year to year, but we don't hold it. And if there are certain scholarships that are paying just maybe interest earnings or whatever on the account, that could be the reason for some of the balance.
Okay.
Let me do more research on that.
Okay, yeah, I appreciate it, thank you.
Well, as a, for instance, is it possible that somebody might endow a fund or say, I want 3 years of a fund and I'm gonna write you one check?
That could be,
Would be distributed over
since it's money,
multiple
we
years.
just hold. It's not.
Okay, then I guess maybe I did misunderstand. So those are scholarships that the high school gives out from the departments, like when you go to the award ceremony, sorry, I hate to give back, like the French Honor Society gives a scholarship. So we're talking about that money, not the money that like the foundation awards, that's separate.
Correct, there's all kinds.
I'm clear
scholarships
now,
come
thank you, now I'm good.
different kinds
I
of
think
places.
it's all done at the same time, so I think if you find anything else interesting, I'd love to hear it, but I think I do understand more clearly now, thank you.
And it's probably worth a look because it hasn't, for a fund that size, is our primary focus.
Right, absolutely, thank you.
I have one clarifying question around the capital reserve, capital project funds. Once money is allocated to either of those funds, it is locked in, correct?
It goes there, it does not return.
It does
It is
not
used for that purpose.
So I wanted to underscore that, especially for the new board members, but when we are ultimately considering, which it's probably me, I can say what I support that concept, of course. But that's the trade-off is it's locked away, but the benefit is it is locked away. You're allocating it for this. It can't be spent on other things by future boards as well. It just can't be voted back. So that's all. Thank you. Any questions from the public?
I have a question.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
No worries.
I'll go back to you.
Apologies.
You're fine.
You mentioned purchasing securities potentially to extend the interest rates 12 or 24 months. Just a procedural question as a new board member. What is the process by which that would happen? Would you make the recommendation and then we would approve it in a budget meeting, or is that something that you can approve independently and we kind of?
So we're very limited in what we can invest in.
Yeah.
Everything we invest in is extraordinarily safe. So US Treasuries,
Right.
bank CDs, the likes. So
CDs is what I was thinking of, is likely the answer.
and honestly, I wouldn't even reach out to do a bank CD. I'd do it through a liquid government fund that has it fully collateralized. So that way there's zero risk to the district.
Mhm.
So that's the type of thing we're talking about through PISLAF, which is our primary account holder. So what we do is we work out our cash flows with PISLAF. We plan our cash flows for the next 2 years. And if we don't think our fund balance is going to dip below a certain amount in mid-August, which is that's when we have the least amount of money as a district, that's our target for how much we could lock in at a longer term.
Okay. And on the approvals piece, you make the decision, we don't vote on that. Is that part of the budgeting process and you make the decision as part of the package?
So the board approves all financial institutions that we invest in. So if I were to say, let's invest in a CD for a bank in Virginia, it would require the board's approval because that's a brand new financial institution. The investments I'm talking about are all through PISLAF, which is a
Okay.
Pennsylvania liquid asset fund, which is already a pre-approved financial institution.
Right. Okay. Thank you for clarifying.
Thank you. Any other board questions? All right, seeing none. Did you have a question? Yes. Thank you.
My question is around the student activity fund. Does that include the money that is collected at the, I'm assuming you only charge for the football and the basketball games, I don't know if you charge a fee for any other.
The gate receipts,
Yes,
That does not. The gate receipts go right to the general fund.
okay,
So the budget for sports is set partially based on how much we collect in gate receipts. And our athletics budget is 1.5 million. I think our gate receipts are under 50,000 a year, so that it's just a small piece, but that's the proper way to record gate receipts in a district.
another question. So I'm not sure in terms of the gate receipts, if we're looking at progressing in how we have the process, so most of the schools that we've attended games at for this year have gone all electronic for their tickets, where they, I think of only out of the 10 games, only 2 actually accepted cash. And they use this as their tracking system where the kids get a barcode to get into the game. Most of them use a system called Hometown, which is what the parent associations for the football team we use for our funding and at the events to track tickets. So I'm not sure if the district has considered moving in that direction, if that's more, of course, there's a fee for using it, it's a minimal fee for using that system, but however, it does give you a way to track all of your tickets as opposed to just relying on cash. I would assume that that would help to alleviate the amount of, I don't know how many people collect cash at the gates. I'm usually already inside the concession stand helping to set up before the game starts, so I'm usually not there when they're doing that, but I know our lines get pretty long for the football games. So if we were able to have an electronic system where they were able to just purchase their ticket and scan it in as opposed to having to collect and give out change, would that be helpful? Is that a better way to track how much we're actually taking in? Because we're not just relying on just strictly cash. And then that can be used for not just the football, but all of our events in the school, all the plays, anything where they collect money for entry, even if it's free, and people are allowed to also donate to that hometown system too. So that's something we found to be a very useful tool for us. And I've seen every school that we've gone to that has taken electronic payment has used that same system. So just a question to see if we considered that.
No, I did. That's a fantastic suggestion.
Okay,
I know our athletic director did reach out to Hometown this season, mid-season, after we had those line issues at the high school.
okay.
There is an implementation period, which was longer than what it would have benefited us for this year, but I know that's in the works.
Okay.
Just filled with great suggestions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the funds? I think we're good. All right, now looking at building level budgets. So every year as we start the budget process, we take a look at enrollment versus school to try and gauge whether our budget per school is appropriate. So this is the tool we use. This doesn't necessarily mean that the per building budget is going to change, but it's a tool to make sure that we're within the ballpark or where we need to be. Keep in mind that this total budget is only $1.5 million for school supplies, for school activities. It is 1.2% of the entire budget, so it's a very small piece. But when we put all of our enrollment and we weight students differently based on need, because special ed students require more supplies than regular ed students, and when we allocate that per building, you can see that there are some changes of note. On Cheltenham, you can see their enrollment has slowly increased. So, this chart would indicate that maybe we need to look at Cheltenham Elementary and allocate additional funds to Cheltenham Elementary. It shows that Elkins Park's enrollment decreased slightly. Maybe we need to look at the budget for Elkins Park. I think with the financial position we're in, it's not the time. Now's not the time to decrease building budgets, but more or less look for areas in which we need to increase because of increasing enrollment. Just highlighting some of the areas that pointed out that are new to myself. So do we need to look at increasing the building budget for Cheltenham Elementary and the high school and potentially Wyncote? That's where my focus is. Any questions on the building budgets?
Mr. Burdell Williams.
Quick clarifying question, the fraction of a student, just curious how we arrived at that calculation.
So regular, it's arbitrary. Let me start with arbitrary. In our per pupil
I'm
amount
gonna say tall.
at Cheltenham is significantly higher than a lot of our surrounding districts, so that clarification to start. Regular students are weighted as one, gifted gets an additional factor, special ed gets an additional factor on top of that one. Arbitrary and, rightfully subject to scrutiny, but for the sake of consistency, that's how it was calculated.
Mr. Epps?
Thanks. Also for clarity, for lack of better words, you're essentially saying, despite what the data says, you would probably advocate that those schools are held harmless. And we actually look at increased investments at schools where we see enrollment increases. That's correct.
Mr. White?
Yeah,
Dr. White, sorry.
no worries. The building on Charles's question. Super Williams. I'm gonna get used to that. Okay, so the percentages of student and the multipliers related to them. I'm gonna give an example to make sure I understand how this is calculated. I have a kiddo who is 20% in special ed, 80% in regular education. Is he weighted differently for 20% of his time, or, okay, so we are not that far in the weeds. Got it, okay, so it's based on an individual student, so if it's majority time in regular education, then it's
This is a very high level
Got
graph to try and address the fact that a certain elementary school might have more students or might have increasing enrollment, and how does the budget respond? Versus just allotting the same amounts year over year, and then you end up in a pattern where some schools are underfunded, some schools are overfunded. That's what.
Got it.
That's the essence of this.
And then,
Y'all.
I'm good, great, thank
Ms.
you.
Levin? Yeah.
sorry, this is, so the numbers that you're using are numbers from the 2020, this year's enrollment?
October 1st,
Okay.
enrollment for the state.
Ms. Mulhern?
I think, Mr. Swigart, you said at the beginning what the building budgets cover. So I heard you say student activities and athletics.
This is primarily the principal's budget, the classroom supplies budgets, paper, those types.
Okay, and so extra duty, extra pay does not come out of this. That's separate and that's a contractual thing. Something like PBIS, that kind of stuff is the principal's budget. Is that,
PBIS has its own curriculum district-wide budget, but it also has classroom supplies budget. So there's two separate budgets at play here, and this is the classroom supplies piece.
okay, all right, thank you.
Any other board questions? This is it's a fascinating new chart with
Yeah.
new kinds of numbers. So thanks for giving us a chance to see it.
So this is resurrected. I pulled this out of the.
I love it.
Speaking with fire.
Does this process account for qualitative need? So this looks like a quantitative need in terms of enrollment is changing or in various aspects. But in terms of a principal has identified a program that they know would have a high impact or that kind of input, is that part of this process or?
So, but part of this funding is principals' accounts. So if they wanted to direct that money towards that purpose, that could be their option.
What I mean is if, let's say, there's actually, let me make sure I understood what you just said, which is essentially the principals have the money and they can allocate it however they feel is most appropriate for their building's needs. I guess my question is, if a principal needed more than what their budget accounts for, how is there a process for that to be explored?
Yes. Okay. There's a opportunity for them to submit proposals based on programmatic need. It does not always mean that can be honest, but they definitely, as Mrs. Swigart meets with each school, that is something that we encourage.
Yeah. Thank you. And that was.
This is where you're in elementary school, you have math department, English department, social studies, they get a building within the building allotment. Yeah, that's this money. That makes a lot of sense.
And then tying back actually to my question on facilities for, let's say, again, I know elementary better than middle or high school, but they would like a new slide or a new piece of playground equipment that would blow out their building level budget. Is that a totally separate thing?
Completely, that's, so in my goals,
Yep,
when you clicked on the comprehensive
right.
maintenance plan and beyond.
That's in there. That's
That's where
understood.
those types of pieces.
Thank you. All right. Any public question? All right. Thank you.
So piggybacking off of the beginning of the budget process, I should have put this Act 1 index future projection at the top. But in late November, the IFO, the Independent Fiscal Office, released its future projections of Act 1. And this is a very rough measure of the school district's ability to raise taxes in future years to meet future obligations. So if we use this as a measure for years going forward, what is our target for trying to limit our contractual increases and our expenditure increases? It's all kind of laid out in that report. So we take a look at our largest expenditures. What are our salary increases? We don't know yet. In negotiations, what are our medical insurance increases? That's our third biggest expense. Well, our first look, which is a very rough draft of a look, is a 10% increase. So here we have a 10% increase, which is double our ability to tax. So, this is an area we need to focus on. And we look at PCERS. What's the PCERS rate increase? It's going from 34 to 34.73. So that's a 0.73 increase, well below our ability to pay for it. And that's a $385,000 increase. And we talked about transportation. Next year has a 4% increase, or roughly $300,000. And that 4% increase is contractually billed out until 2028. So, then that starts to raise concern about 27, 28. So that report is an interesting read. I can send it out if anyone is interested in it. But that in essence kind of lays the framework and the groundwork for years to come. And the last piece I kind of drew through here was that we need to take a look at our expenditure per student and what areas do we need to focus on? Are those expenditures per student out of line, and does that warrant further investigation and research? Any questions on the future budget considerations?
Any board questions?
Not a question, but clearly those projections take into account that new funding formula, right? It's gonna come out. That's what you forgot to say. Yeah, that's
Right.
why they're so low.
Well, our largest expense is salary and benefits, and these rates are based off of the state average weekly wage increase, so it's all tied.
Ms. Loman?
I just wanted to mention, I reported on this at the last legislative board meeting, but the MCIU is exploring the possibility of offering medical clinics for staff members in all the districts that it serves. I don't know if that's something the district might be interested in. Just put
I've
that
been to
out there.
several of those meetings.
Even it's, okay, all right, great.
It's a model that definitely worked well for North Penn where it was in place. North Penn is a district that can stand alone independently with its own clinic because of its size. With our district size and with the number of lives we insure, it's going to require a partnership, and that partnership is whether that idea, how that partnership works with the surrounding districts is whether that idea works or doesn't work.
Right, pretty sure, makes total sense.
Any other board question or comment? Any public question or comment? Yes.
For Ms. Loman, so the MCIU is exploring having their own standalone clinics for their employees.
For the employees of the districts that they serve.
Okay, just want to make sure I understood that.
That's what's through, not their up, it's through CPAS. So that's a lot of districts are self-insured in Montgomery County.
Right.
It's all through an organization called CPAS, which is Southeastern Pennsylvania, something that starts with an A. Trust. So we all participate in the self-insured trust so that the administrative costs are less. I forget exactly how many districts, but it's more than 10. It's more than a dozen. And the idea is we all build clinics stationed throughout Montgomery County that are accessible to our employees, where we can control the cost of those clinics without bringing in a third party insurer.
That makes sense. So I'm kind of familiar with that only, my father was a firefighter in the city. So for the longest time, the city had what they call their police and fire medical clinic. Where all the police officers and firefighters were able to go to this clinic for all their pretty much medical services. Also under their union, even to certain doctors that were contracted through that. So I kind of grew up under that type of program, under my dad's health insurance. That is no longer, I'm not sure how that department, but that went on for years through the fire department and their union, so I think that's a great idea. If you could partner with another school district and maybe the probably could help them cut down a lot of healthcare costs, so healthcare auditors, I already know how much costs come out of every year, it's extremely expensive, but that would be, I'm hopeful that you can do that, 'cause that would be extremely beneficial to cutting down your costs and.
It sounds exactly the same as the program we had, except that instead of firefighters, you use the teachers.
Yeah. Okay. I'm sure I understood that was kind of safe. Okay. I hope that kicks off. That'll be great and helpful for kids also. Thank you.
One clarifying point for the recording, but MCIU stands for Montgomery County Intermediate Unit, and that is a Montgomery County level support system for all school districts that fall under its jurisdiction. So some common services can be centralized or run through the MCIU, so that way each individual district does not have to re-implement the same thing. So it's kind of an economies of scale and supports and services. Any other board question or comment? And yeah, Mr. Burdell.
Just quick, because I looked it up, CPAS, Southeastern Pennsylvania Schools Trust.
Oh, PA. Mr. Swigert, I do have one question around the PSERS rate, and for the new board members and for the public, PSERS is the pension plan. It is a very high ratio of for every dollar, an additional 34 cents, and it looks like 34.73 cents needs to be allocated to the pension plan. My understanding is that if it weren't for the unfunded portion, that would be closer to 6%. But the fact that we have such a backlog of expenses down the pipeline, that number is much higher. The unfunded portion is divided in half. The school districts are responsible for locally providing half of that additional 28%. That is the difference between the funded and unfunded portion. And then the state takes on the rest of it. Do we have a sense of whether that increase, is there a similar projection, future projections for the PSERS preliminary rate increase?
Yes, typically in sometime in November or December, they finalize the rate, so it could be less than 34 points.
Okay,
So
but we don't have a similar 5-year projection of.
we do, it climbs up to close to 40%, kind of
Okay.
goes off as word got it over the next few years.
That's intimidating. Okay, Mr. Burdell Williams, yes, thank you.
Our PSERS rate did not change last year, correct?
It decreased.
It decreased, that's
For the
what it was,
first time.
yeah, for the first time, yeah, all right,
However,
got it. Thank you,
maybe
just
ever.
for context, yes, it had been on a steady increase.
I believe it was 35.29%, it dropped down 34%.
Yep,
Now it
Got it.
climbs back up.
Let's get back on.
thank you for clarifying,
All right, thank you.
fun times.
Was there another agenda item? Yes, then.
Last agenda item, I'll talk really fast. So, for the Act One timeline enacted by the state, the school district has to make a decision before the first week in January, whether it's going to increase taxes above the Act One index that is set forth. This year's Act One index is 5.3%. So before January, the Cheltenham School District has to report to the state whether their intention is to increase taxes greater than 5.3% or less than 5.3%. If they are intending to increase taxes less than 5.3%, they draft a resolution stating that That's what this language is. It's basically saying we can increase it 5.3%. It could be 0 to 5.3%. So that's the essence of this resolution. So it's not, this is a tax increase. It's just, we are telling the state that we are not going to increase it greater than their index that they set forth.
Thank you. And just clarifying point, this would be on the December legislative.
Has to be on next week's agenda.
And so this would be a good time to ask questions. You're welcome to deliberate. This is a public meeting about this concept. I will just say that 5.3 is a very high number, and we have been dealing with a surplus lately. So I assume that the administration is recommending that we should pass this.
Yes.
Yes, and so I would second that recommendation. Ms. Wellman.
Mr. Schwerger, do you have a sense of, I just sort of informally from talking with other MCIU board members last year, that we were one of the very few districts in Montgomery County that did not tax up to the allowable index rate. From what I could tell, almost everyone else was right at the top. Is that accurate?
We were one of the lowest. I won't say that they went to the top, but they were anywhere from, say, 2% to the top.
Mhm.
What were we at, 1.1 last year?
I was seeing this for neighbors with 3% or more. There were some districts, because of the way they changed the state funding formula, there were some I wouldn't say impoverished, but the less wealthy districts that were able to do a low rate as well because of that formula change. But that's not our case. Our case is increase in revenues, decrease in expenditures, better fiscal management over the past 3, which is prior to me being here. I'm not for
Also, you
So that's our case, and it won't be deemed appropriate given the surplus to tackle it more.
Thank you.
Thank you. Was there another hand from a board member? Mr. Burdell Williams.
Yeah, just acknowledging to Mr. Schultz' earlier point, the district's success at managing costs, and even in this market where things have become extremely expensive from a consumer perspective, being able to hold us fiscally accountable and responsible so that we do not have to go up to index or even creep close, again, is a testament to the work of the administration, and again, fully support those efforts continually and any others that we can discuss to try to address that going forward. I mean, 5.3 is a big number. It looks like it'll be that way next year as well, but I'm not anticipating that we have to get to that point. 1.1 feels good. I know the burden on the taxpayer in Cheltenham is significant. There were some years of 0 a long time ago. I don't think that's necessarily in the cards, but again, grateful for the efforts, and as one board member, the resolution I do support.
I do want to say that this is the honeymoon period. I don't want to be very transparent with that. Ms. Knox brought up a great point in terms of what we're even dealing with the practice field. There's things that have not been prioritized that now have to be prioritized, which is going to cost. So even though I don't want anyone disillusioned by what our current state is, when you look at doing just HVAC at the high school, that's anywhere from $25 to $50 million. So the disappointment in the field, I understand, but we're doing things that hadn't been addressed, which is going to take time, unfortunately, to get it right. So I feel good that we're at least addressing it now, where it wasn't being addressed in the past. And it may not benefit some of our current families, and they have to make decisions which are in their best interest, but it's definitely going to set us in a better position as a district with moving forward. And that's the work. So appreciate your comments. I just wanted to put in perspective that this is definitely the honeymoon, because I just gave one example. this whole feasibility study that we're doing right now is really huge as we look at what are we gonna do with our EP situation. You guys already know to put new building on that site would be $70 million. So I'm just, again, for the public, in a public setting, I'm just sharing. So let's enjoy this.
Yes.
And thank you. But I just really want to see that we're in a honeymoon period right now. A lot of major decisions that we as a board are going to have to make with how we move forward. So that's just a point that I'm making on a higher level.
Thank you, Dr. Scriven.
Yeah.
He's not here with us now, and I don't work for him or get a kickback, but Mr. Diaz deserves a lot of credit for our financial situation as well. There was market assessment adjustment that his firm helped the district correct. And that was, I don't want to say a one-time deal, but that was once in a decade, maybe type situation. And the work of Chuck Lindeman with refinancing when interest rates are low. You know, I was doing the same thing with the same types of activities the district I came from. They benefit from that. I come here, I benefit from their work, essentially.
Is there other board questions, Mr. Epps?
Appreciate what's been shared, adding to the comments from Dr. Scriven. Us passing this doesn't mean we won't still consider a tax increase. And so I believe we have received some preliminary. We went over preliminary budget numbers already or not yet? Not yet. We haven't done that yet. Okay. So I'll pause my statement there, but just wanted to acknowledge that we might be in a honeymoon phase. We might have a surplus, but if we're looking ahead, similar to last year, we may still need to propose maybe a small, but still an increase in the tax rate, even if it doesn't surpass 5.3.
And on that point, I do want to fully underscore, this is not a passage of a tax increase. This is a commitment to not increase taxes above 5.3% in June.
Right.
So the budget process is only, it hasn't even really, I mean, I guess this is kind of the first public step of the budget process, which is to set a cap. But next, over the next several months, we will be having at these financial affairs committee meetings, presentations of preliminary budgets, discussions. There will be lots of opportunity for members of the public to comment, ask questions, and the like. And I'll also note that tying that to the previous agenda item around capital, part of those conversations may well be, what should we budget to put into capital reserve funds, knowing what projects are coming down the line. So anyway, I think I saw a hand of another board question, comment. Then I imagined it. Are there any other questions in the room? Seeing none. Is there, all right, we're good. Thank you for the presentation, and thank you all for the thoughtful questions. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Mr. Verdell Williams, is there a second?
Second.
Dr. Whiting, all in favor?
All right.
Aye. Have a good evening, everyone.